No, allez, marche, c'est comme ça. Um, Africa has a lot of problems, so I can't just start by just dropping my own video first. But before we start first, I will just appreciate if we can try to understand some uh, other uh, concept. We need to make some enough research, okay? Before I goes ahead to discuss with you the problems mitigating development and resources in Africa, we need to go through as many research as possible.
Us online. I'm Erek Dušek. I'm Managing Director at the World Economic Forum, and it is my pleasure to be spending some time with all of you, but also with our illustrious panel today.
So this is about
in a session we titled New Development Actors for the 21st Century. This is one of our pivotal sessions here
and
conversations, dialogues at the annual meeting.
So I want you to listen to this quick
overall
as it is here.
Gathered here amid quite seismic shifts for the world economy, for the world, if you will. You may know that the theme overall for the annual meeting is collaboration for the intelligent age, where we are pointing to the fact that we are living through quite a unique period of technological advancement and innovation, and of course the opportunities and the risks involved in that. And then we're also, of course, pointing to the forces of fragmentation that were...
So guys, I just want you to understand there are some script, there are some important important discussion you need to follow. You need to digest this appropriately before you can have an access to the video I made with regard the various problems mitigating against Africans and the development of resources in Africa. Okay? So I need you to understand this because you have to go through some enough research. You need to understand. There are many people that have spoken about it. A lot of people have spoken about it. You are listening right to the World Economic Forum. So all countries are represented there, and Africa's development were quite very well discussed. Okay, and this is what I want you to listen to. I need you to understand the discussion. Okay, in the world as it is in the World Economic Forum. So this was held about is it about 3 weeks ago? Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
Seeing geoeconomically, geopolitically, and also societally in certain corners of the world playing out. So it is really in this context that we wanted to look at what
they can join the mainstream of the state building, of the economic recovery through that lines. So the most important thing for Somalia is economics, infrastructure support and human capital development support. Of course, infrastructure is not only ports, highways, airports, but also energy is very important. As of now, energy is one of the challenges that we have when it comes to economic development. Somalia has ample of natural resources, but Somalia has no financial capacity to invest, and in many areas the know-how to use those natural resources. So these are the areas that we are focusing right now: investment, attractiveness.
So, President, just a very short follow-up before I go to Anjebe. We also have a initiative around it at the World Economic Forum. We call it Humanitarian Resilience Investing.
Yes.
And there we are really trying to see how we can connect better local entrepreneurs with impact investor, with development your advice if there are entities out there that want to connect with your young entrepreneurs? Are there certain mechanisms that are already set up in your country where they can do that?
Yes, there are a lot of private organizations that work in that, banks, other institutions, but the major one that we want to be the hub for this issue is the Somali Development and Reconstruction Bank, which is now active, which provides all the facility, engaging the young people, the entrepreneurs for a minimum investment and loans and all this. So what we would like is the world to focus and invest on the Somali Development Bank, so that the bank covers, engages the young generation for their own gainful employment. That is where the humanitarian is always, Somalia has been in a humanitarian situation for the last couple of decades. But that cannot continue for as of now. Even we're feeling the kind of fatigue that has many donors on Somalia when it comes to humanitarian. So what we wanted the world to focus, yes, humanitarian is very important.
To, in many ways, scale up what works, double down on issues that are difficult, like prevention, and make sure that we go forward understanding that there's a huge overlap when it comes to economic development, prosperity, and poverty reduction, and managing countries that are fragile.
Thank you so much. Could I just, as a follow-up question, you mentioned managing transitions and you also mentioned young people. Could you mention a few tools or mechanisms that you have for that?
So I think the most important part for young people is, of course, education. We see a lot of interest across the continent of Africa right now in vocational training, because people want to have the readiness of skills that match the job market. So we're looking also, how do we increase our investment in vocational training? I think the second thing is to entrepreneurship, because at the end of the day, the jobs are created to a large extent by local firms. And we see that sometimes up to 60-70% of new jobs come from SMEs. So it's incredibly important to support those. And what we also find is that often small companies, very small companies start, but they don't grow. And when they have to close down, the jobs are lost. So we want to also see growth in jobs. That's very important. And then, of course, I find it very, very important that we focus on things like enabling. So digital services, energy services, basic infrastructure services. Without that, it's very hard to imagine a world where people can secure jobs and have dignified jobs. I will mention just two initiatives that we've launched that I think also speak to His Excellency's point. One is something called Mission 300, which is our ambition with partners and with countries to connect 300 million Africans to electricity who are today not connected. We have set this goal by 2030. It's going to be very difficult, but we like difficult things because it makes us focus. And the IDA that you mentioned will help so much. We're very happy about that. And the other is that we have created a council for jobs, because we really need to understand how we can accelerate the creation of jobs and what we have learned over the years. And we actually see that in many ways, the access agenda on electricity is also very linked to jobs, because the off-grid of our plan actually does end up creating quite a few local jobs. So we're excited about this, but we need everybody in. So join us in Mission 300 and focusing on jobs. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's a very important project. Very excited about it. Speaking of Africa, I just have one more thing. I hope you don't mind me asking. We look, for example, here specifically for Africa. Only 3.5% of global foreign direct investment is going to Africa. Less than 2% of global venture capital goes to Africa. IFC, your private sector arm, I've met them many times, and of course others. There is, of course, always this dialogue with the private sector, and how can we crowd in more private sector capital. I do also talk to investors And sometimes there is this, at least from that side, there is this, we don't speak the same language. And any ideas, you've been at it for a while, any ideas how we can actually finally crack that and really unleash more private sector capital through those partnerships with development banks?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. The World Bank Group, through the International Finance Corporation, is actually an institution when it comes to private investment into Africa. I think IFC, the International Finance Corporation, provided about 7 billion into the private sector in Africa in our previous fiscal year 2024. But it does require certain prerequisites, if you will, to really increase that. And what we have seen is that a lot of investors, of course, are wary about regulatory and policy uncertainty. Even for this Mission 300 program and project we have, that's really the starting point in order to step up investment. So it's very important to work together with government and for government really to put in place those regulations that will help provide the certainty outlook for the investors to feel like there's an environment to invest in that is somewhat predictable. So that's one important point. Having said that, even when you have that, de-risking is very important. And de-risking we can do through a number of different ways. Blended finance, sometimes to buy down the cost. We have guarantees that we can use, both political risk insurance, but also project-based guarantees, so that investors feel there's a fallback opportunity should they need it. And then we have something under IDA, which is very important, which is the private sector window. And we have provided support to about close to 300 projects now in 50 different countries using the private sector window of IDA, which is resources under IDA that go to IFC and MIGA in our institution, so that they can actually provide support so that lower income countries and the poorest countries around the world can attract and benefit from the role of the private sector. So yes, difficult, certain prerequisites, and then we need tools and instruments to make sure that we even entice the private sector even more. At the end of the day, I also think it's important to focus both on international, but also very much the local private sector.
Yes.
And I do think there are many countries in Africa that have that dynamism in the form of local entrepreneurship, local interest to invest, and they know the community so well, so they also know what the customers really need.
Thank you so much. Badr Jafar, if I could turn to you. Speaking of entrepreneurship, smaller companies, you have been throughout the years a big advocate around impact entrepreneurship, and you've also recently been publishing specifically on the role of small businesses in crisis afflicted situations, economies. Tell us more about why you think this is important.
So thank you, Marek, and congratulations really to the Forum for really starting this initiative, this Humanitarian and Resilience Investment Initiative. I know it's already bearing fruit, and I'm sure it'll continue to grow. If I may just answer the last question that you asked my fellow panelists. I mean, we as Crescent Enterprise, we have a number of different operations, different platforms, ports, logistics, healthcare. A number of years ago, we set up a venture capital platform. We've invested now so far over $500 million in different parts of the world. I think the excuse that you've heard from some people that they don't speak the same language is total nonsense. I don't speak Hindi or Mandarin, and we're investing in India, we're investing in China.
That's not what I meant.
Well, sure. But even that, I understand. But going back to what you actually meant, the enabling environment, that's extremely important. I have no doubt that there are incredible entrepreneurs across Africa. We invest in North Africa, but not in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, the opportunity is that these entrepreneurs and these social entrepreneurs are closest to the challenges that they're trying to address. Capital is a coward at the end of the day. So absolutely having the right enabling environment, the right legislation, the right networks, and finding a number of champions and case studies that will then inspire others and create competition amongst investors to come. And I hope at some point soon we see that tipping point, everybody crowding in capital, investment, really investments, not charity, but investments. That's right. Into Africa. Going to your question, which is predominantly, I imagine, about humanitarian situation, before I zoom into the role of the private sector, useful to set some context. So today, more than 300 million children, women, and men are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. OCHA estimates, as you mentioned, that the average duration now of a humanitarian crisis is over 20 years. So this is almost a whole generation. And last year, less than 40% of humanitarian appeals were met. Less than 40%. Now, looking at the role of business, 9 years ago now, when I was asked to join the Secretary General's high-level panel, the percentage of engagement in meeting appeals, percentage of engagement by business in meeting those appeals was less than 5%. Today, 9 years later, it's less than 5%. Now, why so stubbornly low? I think there are three key challenges that existed 9 years ago, still exist today, maybe improved slightly in some areas, but still to a large extent exist today. The first is the politics of the crisis. At the turn of the century, humanitarian crises were roughly evenly split between natural disasters and human conflict. Today, the vast majority of appeals are for human conflict situations, which inherently are very political in nature, which scares business away. And I think that governments can do a lot better job of actually guiding businesses and private investors as to how to engage and invest and donate as required to these situations. The second is still, I believe, despite the incredible work that the humanitarian system does, there's still no clear platform for business to invest and to engage beyond just writing a check. So the humanitarian sector has still not done a good enough job, as the numbers show, of really engaging business for what they're good at doing, beyond giving money, but for their skills, for their capacity, for their networks, for their innovation that they bring along. And this is a massive untapped opportunity. And the third, more broadly, is we have to move the overall narrative, again, from charity to investing in resilience. And I think once we do, we'll see more capital, more real investment capital crowd in. On the role of SMEs, obviously have, or maybe not obviously to some, but I'm very convinced that they have a transformative potential in addressing crises and building resilience. They make up over 90% of businesses globally. In many developing and frontier markets, they generate up to 80% of formal jobs, and they are closest to the communities that are being affected. And the most important thing that small businesses and micro enterprises in these disaster zones can do is to get back up and running, to create the important and generate the important goods and services, and of course the all-important employment that we've just touched on. But today, I think there is SMEs are underutilized in the humanitarian system, and in some cases, humanitarian aid unintentionally makes it actually much more difficult for SMEs on the ground. When you flood, and this of course isn't, across all situations, but there are many situations over the last few decades that we've seen where you flood free goods into a market, and without procuring from local businesses, you actually harm those businesses. And you create these situations of perpetual dependency, which is why we've seen to some extent these humanitarian situations lasting for decades. The UAE takes a lot of these challenges on a per capita basis, and more recently launched Earth Zayed, which really consolidated many of the existing humanitarian and development institutions and organizations in the UAE and in Abu Dhabi to make sure that we have better connectivity and efficiency, but also to better engage business sector and individual donors in the country. And we've also established the International Humanitarian and Philanthropic Council under His Highness Sheikh Riyad bin Mohammed bin Zayed. And that's again to try and make sure that we are much more strategic in the way that we work together across sectors and of course across geographies.
Oh, thank you. And I think to your point on, I think what IFC calls creating markets still, I think that's when IFC started doing that, I think that's very important, working with startups and SMEs, fund of funds, trying to really make sure. And so, as you said, you're doing similar things in North Africa, but you've also been very active in the role of philanthropy. And so you mentioned capital is covered, and of course philanthropy, if combined with other instruments, can be that additional lever that we can use to really make an impact in fragile context as well. So any ideas, though it hasn't been deployed as much in those environments yet, any ideas how we could...
For a while referred to philanthropy as a forgotten child of the capital system. In many parts of the world, it's seen as playing on the peripheries, and in some parts of the world, it's regarded with a high degree of suspicion. But philanthropy is not small, it's large. Totally, estimates are that anywhere between $1.5 to $2 trillion of philanthropic capital are dispersed. Closer to home, if you look at examples like Islamic almsgiving, across, of course, the Islamic world, the majority of which is outside the Middle East, between zakat, which is compulsory almsgiving, and sadaqah, which is discretionary almsgiving, anywhere between $400 billion to $1 trillion a year is dispersed. At the lower end of that estimate, that's more than the total humanitarian and development aid budgets globally every year. So it's not small money. The more exciting part of it is the quality of this capital. It can be, as you mentioned, more nimble, more risk tolerant, more equitable in its deployment. And this is why it's often referred to as catalytic capital, because in combination with business and government, it can help to create and generate that multiplier effect. Now, we see three trends that I think are all positive for the deployment of more strategic philanthropic capital. The first being this largest intergenerational wealth transfer that we're seeing, that we're witnessing.
Yes.
Estimates keep going up. The last I heard was $90 trillion expected to be transferred to the next generation within the coming 2 decades. And to my second point, this new generation are more, and evidence shows that they are more demanding of impact. They are more demanding of transparency and accountability. They're more attuned to the interconnectedness of our crisis. And also, and to the third point, they're better at using technology. And the third trend is that technology is, again, disrupting this space as it is with others. AI obviously now is able to collate and analyze data a lot more quickly and generate also insights, which are very important for philanthropic investors to better strategically engage their philanthropic capital. And I think technology overall is moving philanthropy from a one-to-many model, where a very wealthy individual would give to multiple causes or projects, to a many-to-one model, where now individual donors, hundreds in some cases of donors can donate relatively small amounts of money towards a single cause or project. So I think this all bodes very well for strategic philanthropy. Again, I think UAE has ambitions to become a hub of sorts for philanthropic capital. It's 7 hours from 2/3 of the world's population. It is deploying extensive amounts of capital in innovation, and including, of course, in AI. I think it has helping to convene diverse voices from north, south, east, west to work together. Finally, I'll just say that I think the future of global giving will blur the lines between investment and charity. And I think that again bodes well for helping to see more private sector actors engage, which is again critical if we're going to move from the billions that we have today to the trillions that we need to address our global challenges and meet the SDGs in 5 years.
Thank you very much, but I should have also mentioned that you are an official ambassador for these efforts, in addition to being a CEO of your company. So, thank you. Moving to Ernesto Torres at Citi. First, if you could, a major financial institution, obviously. What is your institution doing in terms of financing for impact? How are you aiding some of...
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the grand finale. We end Davos on a high note here, and I'm so excited and honored to be here. My name is Sarah Eisen. I'm a host at CNBC, and we are going to have the conversation everybody's been waiting for, the global debate and the global outlook on the economy. Obviously, we have a tremendous lineup here. We have Faisal El-Abrahim. He's the Minister for Economy and Planning in Saudi Arabia. His Excellency, thank you. Larry Fink.
When I received this carbon pricing, ETSs, carbon taxes,
The Future of Jobs Report 2020.
The World Economic Forum, founded by Klaus Schwab, is not just a benign organization that pushes agenda items like transhumanism.
The World Economic Forum launched their social media campaign in 2018 carrying the slogan, "You'll own nothing and be happy." I thought, finally, the predatory billionaires who try to run the world had shown their hand. The public can finally see their World Economic Forum are allowed to see. That didn't happen. The media, who have the same owners as the World
The biggest fear that the World Economic Forum has is that there are going to be people that will not comply. Their biggest fear is your...
But I think it's clear at this point that, Bitcoin is a better form of money than gold.
My message to every business.
But I'm saying something which comes naturally to a small country. I know of other small countries that think alike, including small European countries. Being small helps because your basis for doing well in the world is to be relevant to the rest of the world. You never look inward and you never get too complacent. You're always trying to find a way in which you're complementing someone else's strength and someone else is able to complement your strength. But I don't think that should be the province of small countries alone. We have no choice but to have that cast of mind. I think it also has to be the way in which the major powers think. And in particular, if there was one real positive coming out of President Trump's speech yesterday evening here at the forum, it was the way he spoke about China and the US. It suggested a desire for a new understanding and a desire to avoid a continuous unraveling of a relationship that is still profoundly important for the global world economy. I'm saying something which...
They plan that next year, 1 year from...
Well,
He was all just a test to see it.
This is the billionaire social calendar.
This woman from India.
Are the global elites taking over the...
I read Klaus Schwab statement. Klaus Schwab statements about nothing and be happy, and the statements by Bill Gates and all the World Economic Forum, Davos, Billionaires Boys Club about what they want for the rest of humanity.
CEO and founder of BlackRock. Christine Lagarde is the president of the ECB. We have Kristalina Georgieva, who is the head of the IMF. And we have the president of Singapore, President Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Thank you all for joining us. This Davos has been very interesting. Larry, there's so much optimism around President Trump and pro-growth policies and the U.S. outlook. I sort of wonder, as an asset manager and a risk manager, should we take the other side? Are you worried that everyone's too excited right now? Larry, got me?
It's hard to hear.
Oh, it's hard to hear.
This is why we are putting those things.
Oh, okay. I was just asking you if there's too much optimism around the U.S. outlook right now and whether that was worrisome.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, sir. Now I can hear you. Is there too much optimism in the U.S.? No.
Let me now turn to the theme that I've been asked to speak about today. And that is for the world to respect Africa. Now, the first thing that I want to underline is that respect is never a given. It cannot be purchased. It must be earned. And it is earned based not on rhetoric or requests, but based on action. Concrete action. Consistent action over time. Saudi Arabia has oil, as does Nigeria. Kuwait has oil, as does Nigeria. Qatar has abundant gas, as does Nigeria and other countries. Yet Nigeria is the country with the largest share of its population living below extreme poverty line. In 2023, in Africa. That is not a gold medal that we should be proud about. Clearly, there is something fundamentally wrong in our management, or rather mismanagement of our natural resources. It is also clear that if we continue to mismanage these natural resources, we will remain stuck. I have urged African governments to stop securing loans backed by their natural resources. And that's because those natural resource-backed loans are non-transparent. They're expensive. They make debt resolution very, very difficult. If that trend continues, it will be a disaster for Africa. If we manage our natural resources well, Africa has no reason to be poor. We have $6.2 trillion of natural resources. So how in the world are we poor? We simply need to pull up our socks, stamp our corruption, and manage our natural resources in the interest of our countries and in the interest of our people. And let me say, the resources of a country does not belong in the pockets of powerful and rich individuals. It belongs for the state to be used for the benefit of the people of that country. There must be accountability on our natural resources. Or put a borehole and it's on national television. The very fact that you're actually installing boreholes is an indication of government failure. Because in 21st century, every single house must be having pipe-borne water. So there's nothing to be really delightful about in trying to do that. And we should get away from this feeling.
Yes. Good day, everyone. With regard the problem mitigating against African development, I can't stand up and put myself in front of camera and start talking on my own, discussing about the various challenges and problems mitigating against the development of Africa as a continent. It is quite not possible for me as an individual to just stay in front of camera and just be making videos about Africa's challenges and problems mitigating against the problems against the development of Africa. It is not possible. It is much more important if we try as much as we can to make ourselves available to listen to important seminars. There are so many seminars, so many important meetings that have been held in the World Economic Forum regarding problems, challenges, and difficulties mitigating against Africa as a continent and many other continents in the world. I've always said it to my followers and my subscribers. I've always said, someone who listens, a reader is a leader. If we don't make ourselves available for information, there's nothing you will know. You are not going to know anything. As long as you don't have the habit, if you don't have that habit of listening to news and information, my friend, there's nothing you are expected to know. Unfortunately, majority of ourselves, of our youth, we are much more interested in what we will eat and in other funny things on social media. So many people have neglected the information, most especially the real information and what they are expected to know. And that is why people don't know anything. And when you see somebody who reads a lot of books, someone who is informed, someone who has attended as many seminars and World Congress as possible, when the person talks, you as an individual in your village or wherever you are, you think the person is just making content or the person is just talking on his own. It is unfortunate we find ourselves at this very condition. Now, there have been many congresses that have been held with regard how to develop Africa. The problems of Africa have been identified. There are many problems getting against Africa as a continent. Yes. The first challenge Africa as a major setback and problem is with regard leadership. Leadership. If we take a look at Africa as a continent, there have never been a time we have had good leaders in Africa. It is very, very, very rare. I think the only person I could refer to as a very, very good leader Africa has, a very good leader whom Africa have had once in a time, like that, is this man, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is a leader when it comes to Africa leadership. Nelson Mandela, late Nelson Mandela stand out. And this man, his record, I don't know the record of, I don't know if any Africa leader will beat the record of late Nelson Mandela when it comes to real leadership par excellence. Yes. I would like to take a case study of Nigeria because I am a Nigerian. I grew up in the West. I schooled in the North, and I spent many years in the East. Where, if I'm to talk about Nigeria, I've spent good years in the West. I've spent a lot of good years in the North. I also have a lot of good years in the eastern part. I think it is only in the southern part of Nigeria I am not that very familiar with, but I've been to some quite states like Cross River. I've been to Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom. I've been to other places. So I can tell you some certain problems we are facing as Nigerians. Problems we are facing as Nigerians. Yes, it is well known. Nigeria has oil. There is oil manufacture. We manufacture oil. So is Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, we all know what Kuwait means. Kuwait is a country that has the strongest currency in the world. Kuwait has the strongest currency in the world. Kuwait. Okay? Now, take a look at Saudi Arabia. We know that when you hear Saudi Arabia, thank God that majority of us, we always have a common plan by saying Saudi money, Saudi money, Saudi money. Saudi Arabia is an oil-rich country. They have a lot of oil, massive oil deposit in Saudi Arabia. All right? We all know that. Kuwait has the strongest currency in the world right now. The economy in Kuwait, you can't compare it to any economy. Kuwait has the best economy, stabilized economy in Kuwait. Now, Nigeria, that is located in Africa, those of us who are in Nigeria right now, those of us who knows Nigeria very well, you can all take a look at the condition of Nigeria. We can all together have a look at the condition of Nigeria. How is Nigeria? Does Nigeria have the strongest currency in the world? How is the economy of Nigeria? How can you take a look at it? Are the people living in Nigeria happy? What have Nigeria achieved that make them to stand out than all other African countries and other countries in the world. Let us take an assessment of Nigeria. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we don't have to deceive ourselves. We need to talk what is actually the truth. When we talk about leadership problem in Nigeria, Nigeria has been a country that has never been lucky with good leadership. Leadership is the number one challenge Nigeria as a country has ever had. I remember the time of MKO Abiola, when MKO came up to be the president. We all know what the result was. We knew what the result was, the outcome of the result. I'm not here to justify anybody. I'm not a politician, but I read books and I'm a very good historian. I'm very good at history. Okay? Now, MKO Abiola was a politician. I remember then, back in 1991, he contested, and we knew what the result was. But in one way or the other, he was not declared winner. And after that, we have had a lot of leadership taking place. So many dramas. This and that. It is unfortunate that Nigeria as a country have never experienced good leadership in any of our political posts. Yes, when we have a wrong leadership, when the head is bad, the entire body will suffer. That is a proverb. It is a proverb. When the head has fault, when the head is bad, all your body will suffer. Leadership symbolizes the position of the head. Okay? When in a country where you don't have a good leadership, what miracle are you expecting? Everything is going to be wrong. And that is it. We are definitely going to get everything wrong. And the problem is not with the leader. The problem of Nigeria is with us, the people of Nigeria. The electorate, the masses, we are the real problem of our country. Why am I saying this? When it is time for election, when it is time for Nigerians to go out and vote for a good leader to take charge for the next 4 years, you see a lot of gullible human beings everywhere in nook and cranny. You see a lot of hungry people after bribe, looking for a token change as a bribe. Once they are given 5,000, when they give them 2,000, I don't know the amount of money they give people. They become so gullible, they become so carried away and so useless. Before you know, they get themselves voting for a wrong leader. And this is where Nigeria have gotten it wrong. Election in Nigeria is done by the size of the pocket of the politician. As a politician, if you have good money, if you have enough money, and if you are in the reigning party, there is all probability that you are definitely going to win your election. And so that is why I now believe in this quote that says that Nigeria is not designed for the poor. It is unfortunate. Nigeria, as a country, is not designed for the poor. If you think Nigeria is designed for the poor, then you are lost. You are deceiving yourself. Nigeria is designed for the rich, not for the poor. And that is why you see everything. You look at the system of the country, you discover that the rich are becoming richer, while the poor are becoming poorer. And that is it. Okay? So, the masses are less concerned. Government don't show much attitude or care about the masses. Masses are suffering. It It has been like this for many years. During the time when we were colonized by the Great Britain, I can tell you that Nigeria was much better than how it is now. But unfortunately, after when Nigeria got independence, more than 60 years ago, Nigeria is moving from bad to worse. Why? Because of wrong politicians. We have politicians who are after their own selfishness. Politicians who are after their own progress. Politicians who are after their own pocket. And that is it. So, if you as an individual, if you think that Nigeria could be a better country, the miracle can never happen. I can assure you that. Because if Nigeria would be a better country, then it must start from the mind of every Nigerian, including the leaders and the masses. The mind is a powerful place. That is where every action is conceived before it is carried out. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are the problem of our country. The problem of our country is we by ourselves. Okay? I will not deceive you. I just have to be very sincere with you. Okay? I must be very sincere with you. Nigeria, being an oil-rich country, has been so much backward in the sense that you can hardly see that. You can hardly sense that there is anything oil. Yeah. Those people in Nigeria right now, they are in the best position that can tell you how much they buy a liter of oil. In a country where oil is man, everything has been hoarded. It has been monopolized. So, in Nigeria, you will see an individual with billions of dollars, with different bank account numbers. That is the same country you will see another man that have never fed for even 1 week, once in a week. The masses are suffering, yet the rich are getting richer. This is the condition of Nigeria. Nigerians, majority of us, I must be sincere with you, we are very greedy. We are very selfish. We are very self-centered. And that is why many don't even take a look at the poor. There are many people that are suffering in poverty. We have a lot of graduates, talented Nigerians, educated Nigerians, but in one way or the other, and unfortunately enough, they have nothing to boast for. I can assure you this. Nigerians in their millions have seen themselves flying from one country to another, looking for green pasture, because why? The country has been made inhabitable for them to live and accomplish their dream achievement in life. Yes. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there are many and more problems I would like to highlight. But before I started this live stream, I played some script that was discussed in the World Economic Forum, in the latest World Economic Forum. Some scripts were discussed. I played this script in order for you to hear. I will have to replay it again so that you can get what I'm trying to say.
Let me now turn to the theme that I've been asked to speak about today. And that is for the world to respect Africa. Now, the first thing that I want to underline is that respect is never a given. It cannot be purchased. It must be earned. And it is earned based not on rhetoric or request, but based on action. Concrete action. Consistent action over time. Saudi Arabia has oil, as does Nigeria. Kuwait has oil, as does Nigeria. Qatar has abundant gas, as does Nigeria and other countries. Yet Nigeria is the country the largest share of its population living below extreme poverty line in 2023 in Africa. That is not a gold medal that we should be proud about. Clearly, there is something fundamentally wrong in our management, or rather mismanagement of our natural resources. It is also clear that if we can securing loans backed by their natural resources. And that's because those natural resource-backed loans are not transparent. They're expensive. They make debt resolution very, very difficult. If that trend continues, for Africa. If we manage our natural resources well,
because of my time, right now, Nigeria is among the list of the most indebted countries in the world. Right now, the debt of Nigeria is in trillions. Go and find out. Go and do your research very well. Right now, as now, Nigeria is in the list of the most indebted countries in the world. If you are to talk about the poorest country in the world, before you count 10, you will see Nigeria there. I must tell you the truth. I must tell you the truth. You understand? It is unfortunate. It is very, very unfortunate the country is like that. Then, in the video that I am going to release, I'm going to talk about the leadership problem. I'm going to talk about mindset, attitude about Nigerians. Many Nigerians, their attitude can be very, very surprising. I'm going to talk about religious and conflicts. Religious. When you talk about religious, you see so many churches in Nigeria. But funnily enough, the religious does not reflect in our character and in our daily life. It is unfortunate. You see a lot of pastors, you see reverends, you see churches everywhere. We are so religious, so many religious activities going on, but we cannot see the traces of the so-called religion we are practicing. It has affected our mentality and our mindset. So, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about the demography. This is with regard to the population and how every Nigerian couple gives them no control when it comes to child birth rate in Nigeria. Couples have no control. Nigeria is a country where you see a couple that earn below 100,000 naira per month. Such couples are those couples that they give birth to as many children as possible. How is it possible? When you have a set of family, the father is not earning up to 50,000, the mother is not earning up to 50,000, and these people are bold enough to say that they want to give birth to 7 children. What are you going to use to train your children? Many couples who are earning below 100,000 every month, they give birth to 5 children, 7 children, 8 children. With what are they going to use to take care of these children? I don't understand. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about birth rate. The birth rate in Africa has no control. And the rate of population in Africa is an alarming rate. Because why? The birth rate is creating a lot of concern. No resources, no anything, nothing, no availability, no development, no skilled manpower, nothing. Yes, we have a lot of educated people. The educated people are ruled upon. The educated people are the same one. After reading all the book in the world, they will go back to the classroom to teach. By the time they realize they will be owed by government 5 months salary unpaid, 8 months salary unpaid, they will go on strike. Educated people are hungry, always on strike. So, my dear brothers and sisters, Africa has numerous challenges. So we can only assess all these challenges one after the other. We cannot say it all in a day. So if I'm going to drop video on the problem mitigating against Nigeria and Africa, I am going to create nothing less than 25 videos that is centered on various problems mitigating against the development of Africa as a continent and the development of Nigeria as a nation. Okay? Because the problems are so much. The problems are so much. They are so numerous. Then I will talk about culture and ethics. I will talk about that one too. That one is another one entirely. Then I will talk about skilled manpower. And then I will talk about education. You see a lot of graduates, people who claim to be graduates, but unfortunately, they cannot transplant what they have learned in the classroom to what they are supposed to do on the field. So these are some of the things we are going to highlight. So I will find time to get this in a video and present it to you on my YouTube channel. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I really want to appreciate you for joining this live stream. I have a lot to do right now, so kindly permit me to go ahead with my offline activities. Have a lovely day and bye.